Hi, my name is Jordan Ramos, and I am sharing my interpersonal communication project for Liberty University. I am a newly married wife. My husband and I have been married for 3 years this June, and we are very excited to celebrate our anniversary. I am a new mom to a 2-month-old little boy. His name is Joel, and welcoming him into our family has just completed my husband and I in such a profound way. And I found such joy in caring for my son and in being a new mom with everything that brings. Currently, I teach history and Bible at a small Christian school in Northern California, and I teach grades 7th through 12th. So they keep me busy, they're pretty interactive, but they are a great group of kids. And lastly, I like to think of myself as a lifelong learner. I enjoy reading, I enjoy discovering new material, and I also enjoy sharing that with others. Most often these days, that is my students. So let's get started. My personal goal for this project is that I want to live a life surrendered to God, committed to family, and invested in seeing others find their value and their purpose. And thinking about a goal for this project and for my life seemed like a big task. I want to make sure that my relationship with the Lord is centered, that it's the rock in the rest of my life. Then from there, I'm able to give out and give back to my family and to those that are around me, whether it be in my workplace with my students and co-teachers, or whether it be at church, or to those people I meet in other facets of life. I want them to know the value that the Lord sees in them and that I see in them as well. Some of my background: I am a youngest child in my family. I'm the youngest sibling, the youngest cousin. I'm just the baby of the family. And I think that impacted my development and my communication, in that I had to learn how to have a voice and I had to learn responsibility. Not everything was done for me or came easy, and even though my parents were very supportive in many ways, I had to learn responsibility. Another thing about my past is that I am the first Christian in my family, and that impacted my ability to be able to communicate, because there was this entire realm of my life that my family couldn't relate to. So I had to look outside of my immediate family to be able to invest in conversations about God's Word and about who He is and who I am in Him. Another thing that influenced me was my parents' communication style. As a young child, my dad often expressed his anger very easily. We butted heads a lot, and conversations didn't end smoothly often when I tried to engage with my dad. Because of that, I felt like I had a lot of emotions that were locked up, and that I wasn't able to find the right words to express myself. Relationship with my mom was also strained. She struggled with anxiety at some points, depending on what was going on circumstantially in her life. And I had to learn as well what was appropriate to say and what was not. So there were benefits to those relationships, but also tensions as well. A positive in my background is that my husband and I began our dating relationship when we were both long distance. We met while we were both working and serving the Lord for 2 different organizations, and an event brought us together. And our relationship continued long distance for 1.5 years. So whether it was emails or phone calls or text messages, communication was always at the forefront of our relationship, because that was what sustained it when we weren't together. Sometimes we would go 2 months without seeing one another, and communication proved to be vital for us. My behavioral blend also influences the way that I communicate. My expected of me graph, as you can see in the slide, places me as a driving competent, or a D and C. The area that I scored highest in was C, which is a compliant, cautious personality. Overall, I am task-oriented. I'm confident and have drive. I'm detail-oriented. I care about the results of any project that has my name on it. I sometimes have a hard time seeing the value in the individual, and I have to stop and recognize the achievements of others. And sometimes I can have difficulties relating to my coworkers. That's the sum of my expected of me results and my behavioral blend. For the this is me, how I am when I am at home and relaxed, I was a competent specialist, or a high C and S. This is described as someone who is reserved, enjoys one-on-one relationships, is logical and competent, is security-oriented, sometimes passive, dependable, and dislikes change. I think that this describes me to a T, especially the part about being security-oriented. I often make decisions and communicate with what feels safest. Being unable to take risks can have an impact on my relationships, and it's something that I have to work towards, especially in a world where change is sometimes the only constant. Some barriers to my communication are that I find that I can quickly become flat-brained. Flat-brain syndrome is when emotions come and fill up your stomach, flattening your heart, and eventually flattening your brain and affecting your judgment, the way you think, and what you say. Oftentimes, when people are flat-brained, it can lead to defensiveness, which is a barrier in communication. And I often find that I very quickly can allow my stomach to fill up with emotions, and that I can oftentimes be led by them. Another barrier to communication is that I frequently utilize Perry Mason questions, which are statements or accusations that are cloaked in questions. I find that these are not productive in communicating or in sharing my feelings with others. Another thing I am guilty of is ritual listening. This is when it appears that you're listening, but you are not. I find that I'm most guilty of this when I'm exhausted or tired or mentally strained. I might get home from a long day at work and find that my husband wants to be chatty, and I engage, but I'm not really listening. And another barrier is questions. I tend to barrage people with questions, even if it's my students. Where's your homework? Why hasn't this been turned in? Why? And Peterson suggests that why questions are detrimental because they oftentimes sound like accusations or judgments, and they shut down conversations before they even have a chance to begin. Some other barriers that I struggle with are difficulty with self-closure, struggling with mindfulness, which is the ability to be able to focus on one thing at a time, totalizing in conversations, which is where you take the person and place one aspect of their personality and say that that's the whole of who they are, which is really unfair because that's not what God does to us. Another thing is listening through filters, or assuming that I already know what somebody is going to say or where they're going to take a conversation before I've allowed them to speak. I'm also guilty of using nonverbal cues such as facial expression or lack of eye contact, which gets in the way of my ability to relate and connect with others. Another thing, according to Bacon, is that practice is important. A study found that students who had taken a listening skills class did not necessarily gain listening skills. What that means is that by taking this class and simply reading the material and not allowing myself to practice what I'm learning will not be a benefit to me. I have several resources at my fingertips, thankfully, to this class, and one of those is to remember that I need to keep a balance of E, H, and J. The E is for emotions, the head is for heart, and the J is for judgment. Peterson suggests that to keep this equation balanced, We should have 2 parts personal and 1 parts logical when speaking with others to have the best chance of being heard. Another resource is the Talker and Listener card by Peterson. This is a valuable resource because it identifies who is responsible for doing the talking and who is responsible for doing the listening when it comes to conflict resolution. Talkers must own the problem at hand, are responsible for sharing their feelings and their thoughts, and must do so without accusing, attacking, labeling, or judging. Listeners, on the other hand, must know that they do not own the problem, but it is their responsibility to provide safety, to understand, and to clarify. And they need to be able to do these things without agreeing or disagreeing, advising or defending. When using the Talker-Listener card, it is best to take turns and focus to be the best listener you can and only talk when needed. Other resources I have available to me are being an empathetic listener. This is one of the greatest resources that I found from this class, was all the information on listening. I didn't think that interpersonal communication could be boiled down to having such great ears. Empathetic listening includes avoiding giving advice and questions, using nonverbal acknowledgement such as nodding your head, giving eye contact, and saying, mm-hmm. It also results from having an okay attitude and knowing that both people are okay. Empathetic listening can also cultivate interests, and it includes being attentive, which has to do with your presence. Part of the action plan to help me reach my goal of living a life surrendered to God, invested in my family, and seeing others know their value is that I need to focus on listening, not just hearing. Hansacker notes that there is a difference, that listening is not the same as hearing. Listening requires engagement in what people are saying and a response and feedback. James chapter 1 verse 19 tells us to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, placing listening as the focal point of conversation. Secondly, in my action plan, I need to watch my emotions to make sure that I do not become flat-brained and that I give them to God first before sharing them with others so that they do not carry the bulk of the burden. Another thing that I can do is to meta-communicate. Meta-communication is talking about communication. I enjoy doing this with my husband and with family members so that we can make sure that one another is understood and that there's no underlying hurts. Clarification really does help this process become smoother. In conclusion, I have a quote from Peterson. Real listening gets us inside each other, and there seems to be something in such human connection that touches and changes us. Thank you for the invaluable information in this course, and I hope you learned a little bit more about me through this interpersonal communication project.